Hi, I'm Emotional Husky. I don't know the Venn diagram that exists between lovers of the Civilization franchise and diehard football fans. And if you're an aficionado of only one of those two things, then I apologize. But if you're like me and you love both, then this video is for you. Now, this might be the silliest video I ever make on this channel, but it is a chance for me to ridiculously combine two of my greatest loves, aside from my sweetheart, of course. So, welcome to the first ever World Cup of CIV. Now, to make this work, I have to leapfrog us into the knockout round. This World Cup has the largest pool of teams competing ever, with 48, and there are only 50 CIVs in CIV 6. It means that not every CIV has representation in the tournament, and not every nation participating in the tournament has a CIV in the game to logically represent them. In order to make this work, I took a few liberties with which CIV would represent which country at the World Cup, but most of the time it should be fairly obvious. So, first, here's a look at the playoff bracket. Now, before we get into it, let's take a look at some notable exceptions, beginning with countries with obvious representation in the CIV franchise, but that did not qualify for the World Cup, including China, Russia, who have been sanctioned by football's governing body, Poland, Mongolia, Indonesia, India, Greece, Georgia, Ethiopia, and Vietnam, who all failed to qualify. The Khmer could have represented a number of nations from Southeast Asia, but who all also failed to qualify. Nubia could have stood in for Sudan, but they failed to qualify as well. Macedonia could have represented a few Balkan states, but again, the likes of North Macedonia and Albania failed to qualify. Rome could have represented a bunch of European nations, and I could have got super liberal with who they could have represented, but the obvious one is Italy. What the hell, man? That's 3 World Cups in a row. Part of me enjoys ragging on the Italians, but truthfully, a World Cup isn't quite the same without them. The last CIV who doesn't have any country to represent is the CRE. The obvious choice is Canada, but since Canada is already a CIV in CIV 6, it was just easier to go with them. So Canada is the first of the teams whose CIV connection is obvious, as are Korea, Brazil, Scotland, USA, Australia, Germany, Netherlands, Japan, Sweden, Egypt, Spain, France, Norway, Portugal, Congo, Colombia, and England. Instances where the connection between the CIV and the World Cup contender they represent is less obvious are Mexico, who are represented by the Aztecs, South Africa by the Zulu, Turkey by the Ottomans, Iran are represented by Persia, Saudi Arabia are represented by Arabia. Well, that's kind of obvious, I guess. The Maori represent New Zealand, and finally the Mapuche represent Argentina. Now, I decided to stretch things out a bit. Like I said, it's to make this exercise work. In these cases, it's usually older empires that controlled all or small parts of some of this summer's competing nations, even if they might more accurately represent countries that did not qualify for the tournament. For example, I have Qatar being represented by Babylonia. I stretched the Incan Empire to represent Ecuador, which I think is fair. I have Gaul representing Belgium. Mali represents Senegal. Sumer represents Iraq. No joke, I used Hungary to represent Austria, which feels a bit weird, but just go with it. Phoenicia represents Jordan. Scythia represents Uzbekistan. Byzantium was a pretty large empire, and I have it representing Croatia. And I was real generous with the Mayans, stretching them as far south as Panama in what could be my most egregious historical offense. In the end, I was able to find 35 CIV and competing nations matches. Wanting to skip to the round of 32, it meant that the bracket kind of made itself. If you were a country with no CIV representation, it meant you got eliminated in the group stage. So goodbye Czechia, Bosnia, Switzerland. Ugh, that's a tough loss. They're a good team. Morocco, Haiti, Paraguay, Curacao, Cote d'Ivoire, Tunisia, Cabo Verde, Uruguay, Algeria, and Ghana. West Africa does not get a lot of love in CIV 6, but they make some excellent footballers. Okay, this also meant that I needed to eliminate 3 teams. Sorry, New Zealand, you're going to get battered and finish at the bottom of your group. I have Iraq, i.e. Sumer, not progressing beyond the group stage, as well as Uzbekistan/Scythia failing to move on. So this brings us back to our bracket. So now, what I did have to do was make a few calls on who would finish where in each group. And I'm going to be honest, I have a few upsets. The reason I think this is because the bar for progressing to the next stage is so low, and some giants are going to come up against minnows. So I see a few upsets happening when two established nations go head to head. The one perfect example of this is something whereby Norway overtakes the more obvious group winner, France, where when they go head to head, they just play to a scoreless draw. But when they each go up against Iraq, France wins tidily, say 2-0, but Erling Haaland seizes the opportunity and scores like 7 goals in a single game, putting his side top of the group on goal difference. So keeping that in mind, this is how my round of 32 bracket shook out. Let's quickly review the matchups first, and let's start up here in the top left where we have Germany up against the Ottomans, then Norway against Sweden, the Aztecs take on Babylonia, the Dutch face off against Scotland, Gran Colombia takes on England, Spain plays against Phoenicia, Australia goes head-to-head against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Egypt plays against the Zulu. Then over here on the right side of the bracket, Brazil and Japan go head-to-head. The Inca plays France. Mali takes on South Korea. The Congo plays against Byzantium. Arabia takes on the Mapuche. The US takes on Gaul. Persia plays Canada. And the Maya take on Portugal. And, of course, once the teams are locked in, then the path to the final is all set up. There's a few third-place teams that qualify, and how it all works out, who gets placed where, involves some wonderful puzzling and arithmetic, but there is a handy code you can find on Wikipedia that sorts it all out. So here we go. Let's take a look at all of the matchups, examine the strengths and weaknesses of each team, and see who gets to the final. Right away, we have a doozy. Germany and Turkey, two sides you'd expect to progress to the round of 16 in any World Cup, but only one can do it. Die Mannschaft is a production powerhouse, but they've underwhelmed at recent World Cups. And since winning the competition in 2014, they haven't progressed past the group stage. The Ottomans have a decent young team. And besides, Germany today is pretty much more Turkish than it is German. Plus, with Ibrahim infiltrating enemy cities, I like the Ottomans in this matchup. Neutrals will call it an upset, but there it is. Ottomans, you're moving on. Next up, the Battle of Scandinavia. I still think Erling Haaland is going to win the Golden Boot, but it'll be courtesy of a single group stage blowout. This is not the best Swedish side we've ever seen, but I like their chances at a culture/Diplo victory more than I like Norway going for conquest. That stave church is fine for production, but Norway doesn't thrive from its holy sites. Sweden, you're moving on to the round of 16. Next is the Aztecs against Babylonia. Cotter, let's be honest. You're on borrowed time and only here because I couldn't find a civ to represent Switzerland. I mean, I could reason out a bunch of civs, but it's not on. You're moving on, Mexico. The Dutch against Scotland. Scotland's unique improvement is the golf course, not the football pitch. Need I say more? The Dutch glide into the round of 16. Gran Colombia against England. A rematch of the 2018 round of 16, which the English won on penalties. Gran Colombia just have that movement bonus, which is tough to overcome. If it rains in Toronto that day and the British can turn it into a naval battle, then they have a chance. But I see Colombia getting their revenge in this one. Besides, Harry Kane has never stepped up in big matches. Why start now? Next is Spain against Phoenicia. I really like Jordan. They've made great strides in the last decade, but Spain are on a mission. You see what I did there? There's no stopping them getting to the round of 16. Spain, you're through. Next is Australia versus Austro-Hungary. Australia, I thought, were one of the fun surprises of the last World Cup. And this game is being played at Levi's Stadium outside of San Francisco, and we all know how they benefit from being on the coast. It's a pretty even matchup, but I just think the Raven King ability just isn't going to be a factor in this one. Australia, you're moving on. Next is Egypt against the Zulu. I think there's a chance I might be at the Egypt versus New Zealand game, and part of my heart is in Mo Salah's corner for this World Cup. In him, Egypt have at least one wonder, and they've been the best side in Africa a bunch over the last decade, so I see them moving on in this match. And now to the right side of the bracket. Japan meets Brazil. The last time the World Cup was held in the US, Brazil won. They also won in Mexico in 1970. But the way the Japanese make use of district adjacencies made them an unheralded force to be reckoned with. I don't know why, but this is my one big shocking upset. They barely qualified directly. Rodrigo is hurt and will miss the tournament. Casemiro is just too old to run that midfield. Vini Jr. is a distraction more than an asset. Brazil could be a mess, and Japan a well-oiled machine. I'm calling it. Japan, you're moving on. Next is France against the Inca. I like Ecuador. They finished second in South American qualifying. I'm a big fan of the terrace farm, but the Waragak is a garbage unit. And besides, this is France. They've been to the last two finals. Even if there's turmoil, there's too much talent there not to progress. France moves on. Next up is Korea against the Mali. But not for the most ridiculous endings to an African Cup of Nations and an equally bizarre ruling, Senegal would be the holders of the African trophy. They are passionate, but I see cool heads of the Swan taking the day. Korea moves on to the round of 16. Next is Congo versus Byzantium. The glory days of the Byzantine Empire are waning. After progressing to the semifinal of the past two World Cups, it's a stretch to think they'll do it for a third consecutive time. But the Congo are only here because they got to face Uzbekistan, who just didn't have enough horses. Croatia will have enough. Next up is Arabia versus the Mapuche. Ooh. Now, you might think that this would be a blowout, but 4 years ago, Arabia upset their South American rivals. I was actually in a cafe in Argentina at 7 a.m. watching that game. Folks were stunned, to say the least. But no, Arabia, set to host the World Cup in 2034, is experiencing a sort of golden age, which gives the Mapuche the advantage. With a certain golden boy in the lineup, they'll also have the loyalty of the crowd on their side. It won't be easy, but the Mapuche will progress. Next is the USA versus Gaul. Now, Gaul really underwhelmed in the last World Cup, but the USA has been terrible under Mauricio Pochettino. There's too many controversies, too much political infighting, and too much pressure. Though they have great late-game bonuses, they're useless if a rival takes you out before you even get that far. Gaul gets a gift and moves on. Next is Canada versus Persia. Ugh, my heart is torn. I have my loyalties to my home country, but I would love for Iran to perform well and give its people some hope. I think Canada are finally a decent side. Tajon Buchanan is a great player and Alistair Johnson is creative as heck. But Persia has the immortal. They have the immortal. Ranged infantry. I'll be disappointed, but that will be the end for Canada. We'll be able to say we made it to the knockout round of a World Cup, but Persia is moving on. Okay, last but not least. Well, no, least. Maya, you're getting battered. Portugal just have too much gold income, and there's just not enough land in Panama for the Maya to settle proper functioning cities. Portugal progress with ease. All right, so here we go. The round of 16 is all set up. Let's start with the Ottomans versus Sweden. The last time the World Cup was held in the US, Sweden finished third. Thomas Brolin, Henrik Larsson, Martin Dahlin, and Kenneth Andersson made up an intimidating strike force. I know fans out there are going to remind me of Alexander Isak and Viktor Gyökeres. Oh, if only he played for Hungary. But Sweden haven't had a truly great striker since Zlatan. I think this World Cup could be a coming out party for the Turkish bombard duo of Arda Güler and Kenan Yildiz. The Ottomans progress to the quarterfinal in a nail-biter. I just have a feeling someone's going to score one of the goals of the tournament in this game. Next is the Aztecs versus the Dutch. I have this feeling like the Dutch are going to play beautiful, free-flowing football in the group stage, but when they get to this point, it's going to turn scrappy as opposing sides figure out how to stop their stars. The stars of the Aztec are getting long in the tooth and retiring out of the ball court with few emerging stars to replace them. But Guillermo Ochoa, appearing in his record 6th World Cup, and company do have a never say die, fight to the bitter end attitude that can turn games on their head. I see this one being settled by like a 114th minute trundler off of Wout Weghorst's ass. It won't be pretty, but the Dutch progress. Gran Colombia versus Spain. This could be one of the matches of the tournament. With all of Colombia's comandantes patrolling the field, they'll match the conquistadors stride for stride, especially at 2 p.m. in the Texas heat. But Spain's tactics dictate that religious units adjacent to military units give the military units a combat bonus. In this case, those holy units are the double pivot of Rodri and Martin Zubamendi, who will dictate the pace. They'll force the Colombians to do twice the running. I see Spain doing a professional job in this one and moving on to the quarterfinal. Next, it's Australia versus Egypt. I expect Australia to be industrious and dig and dig and dig in this one. Once again, they'll have the benefit of playing on the coast at Lumen Field in Seattle. But I just see Egypt's wonder-building strength being too strong. In the end, Australia are unable to solve the riddle of the Sphinx, and a Mo Salah stunner helps the Pharaohs onto the quarterfinal. Okay, Japan versus France. Watch. At this point in the tournament, all of the pundits will be saying things like, France have been playing poorly and have only progressed because they haven't played against a truly strong opponent, and Japan have been electrifying in every single match. And by that point, despite being favorites to win the tournament heading into it, people will be calling this one a 50-50. Sometimes we forget that the French are lazy. They like the splendor of their chateau and are prone to sloth and gluttony. But when the chips are down, they revolt and give the world something to model themselves after. It takes 5 games, but the French finally put their Garde Impériale into the field and win the day. Next is Korea versus Byzantium. Korea is one of the strongest scientific civs in the entire game. Byzantium have all the tools to win at domination, but in the end, they can never get the job done, and when they win, it's a religious victory. Ugh. I just think that in sport, if not in Civ, Korea is always underestimated. Cracks in the Byzantine Golden Age show for the first time, and the small stature of the Koreans give them an unexpected edge in the altitude of the Azteca. Korea upset the 2-time semifinalists and progress to the quarterfinal. Next is the Mapuche versus Gaul. This game will get messy when a certain someone sets the record for most World Cup goals. I'm not even going to analyze the matchup because it doesn't matter. By this match, there will be one man who sits alone atop the football world. Next is Persia against Portugal. I'm just going to say that, truthfully, in a game of Civ, I take Persia every time in this head-to-head. I know there's a lot of Civ players out there who love Portugal, even though I think they're overrated. I think Persia give us a good story and make this one interesting, but at the end of the day, Portugal find a way to seize Kumasi and find the perfect synergy on the day to do just enough. Okay, moving on to the quarterfinal. I usually find this the most exciting stage of the tournament where the most exciting games are played. And our first promises to be a banger. The upstart Ottomans against the tulip-loving Dutch. By this stage of the tournament, all of the Ottoman bonuses have come out and they will have done an amazing job and impressed the world. But it's here, in the later stages of the tournament, when you realize how important a plus 50% production bonus on flood barriers really is. The polder gets more beautiful and more productive as you progress through the eras, and this is where the Dutch show it. This could end up being the most exciting game of the tournament. In the end, the Dutch have enough established stars to get the job done, and they win the day. Next is Spain versus Egypt. The bigger Spain get, the more intimidating and profitable their treasure fleets become. But it's a matchup that forces so many questions. Will Lamine Yamal be fit? Do Spain have a world-class game breaker who can win a game all on his own? How far can the aura of one superstar carry a team? And who will show up to lead Egypt? Will it be the Egyptian or Ptolemaic persona of Cleopatra? Or will Ramses step in? At least with the Spanish, you know you're getting Philip, and he's capable of slaying all three. Salah thrills, but Spain have just too deep a squad and do just enough to progress. The next quarterfinal pits France against Korea. In this one, the French players get confused, unable to tell the difference between the Koreans and their previous opponents.
You're both basically Chinese, and he's Bruno.
The result is that the French continue to remind the world why they're expected to reach their 3rd consecutive final. And the final quarterfinal is, oh my, look at that. Now, FIFA have been trying to engineer this for like 20 years. Now, I swear to you, I didn't start here and work backward. This is just too crazy. You know what? Let's get back to this one. Let's look at that semifinal on the left side of the bracket first. Okay, the Dutch versus Spain in the semifinal. These two also have a bit of World Cup history. There was the 2010 final, which Spain won to capture their first and only World Cup title. But the Dutch did exact revenge 4 years later in the most humiliating way possible by winning 5-1, albeit in the group stage. These are two sides with very similar styles, and I have 2 great and really fun Civ stories of each on my channel worth checking out. Spain have the flash and patience of a matador. The Dutch have the honesty and are prolific like a Rembrandt, but they almost cancel each other out. I see this one going the distance all the way to penalties. You line them up 1 for 1 and you think the Spanish probably have them. As long as the Dutch don't send Ronnie Vlaar to shoot first, anyone remember that? Then watch Bart Verbruggen steal the day. Fun fact, in his senior career, he's never conceded a penalty during a penalty shootout. The Dutch go on to the final. Okay, back to that quarterfinal between Portugal and the Mapuche. Obviously, this is the matchup that will steal all the headlines, but it will do so for all of the wrong reasons. We seem to forget that these 2 gentlemen are well past their primes, and I don't expect either to shine in this match. The one edge that Portugal have here is their back two, who will cancel the Mapuche Melon Riders of Messi and Alvarez. I like Conceição to emerge as the successor to Ronaldo. No, he'll never be that good as CR7 was in his prime. But right now, he's young and ambitious and can help Portugal exercise their World Cup demons. The world is going to realize that Portugal, the team, is more than just a one-trick pony. They've got a very deep team and strength at every position. Portugal, move on. So that puts Portugal against France in the other semifinal. At this point in the tournament, France will have proved the doubters wrong. PSG are the Champions League holders, and Mbappe will be proving every Madridista that he's the solution, not the problem. But a few weeks ago, I was saying to my cousin that I think 2026 could be the year of Vitinha, who I think is emerging as the best player in the world. Now, he didn't have himself the best Champions League final, but I think he's a superstar and he takes this game and sets the pace. He'll do something crazy, like set a record for the number of touches in a World Cup match. He will dictate the pace for 90 minutes. He'll hold the ball up in the offensive third for days, and when he gets it in his own half, he'll pump it down the wing off of the hop to Leao or João Felix or Pedro Neto or whoever they put up there. People will realize that his partnership with João Neves in midfield, like a perfectly placed Feijoa, is what drives the French champions, not its front three of Dembele, Doué, and Barcola. Portugal move on to their first World Cup final. So here we are, the World Cup final. And as you can see, I have a new World Cup winner emerging. One of these two great nations will finally get over the hump. Ronald Koeman versus Roberto Martinez. Wilhelmina versus João III. Two very deep squads with unique bonuses that require a certain play style and who will have come a long way to get here. Both will have played a mix of beautiful and scrappy football. Both will have had some good fortune along the way, and in the end, this matchup is all about who controls the more favorable trade routes. There's also some bad blood here. Younger folks might want to check out something called the Battle of Nuremberg. But there's something about a World Cup final where the spotlight is often brighter than the product on the field. And the Cristiano show will be out in full force. But he won't be the only ego needing taming. Memphis Depay plays a style of football that oscillates between the extremes of invincible and invisible. It will be interesting to see which version shows up, and if he understands that he's, at best, the 7th or 8th most impactful player on the pitch. But Portugal are blessed with two players whose egos are bigger than their talent, at least now in 2026. They are Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes, and both will demand to play in this game. It effectively leaves Portugal 2 men short for the most important game in their nation's history, whereas I believe the Dutch will be fully committed to a singular objective and unconcerned with their own individual legacies. The Dutch have been here 3 times before. There is oodles of game tape to watch of their failures. When fans look back on the tournament and want to watch beautiful football, they might not remember much of this match, but it'll be a glorious day in Amsterdam as the Dutch finally bring home the big trophy and write themselves, at long last, into the pantheon of World Cup winners. They will also justify why I chose them to lead my Utopia Project, or what I call the most absurd game of CIV ever played. A link to that video is in the description. So there you have my predictions for the 2026 World Cup of CIV. What do you think? Am I crazy? But a lot of you think it's coming home, right? Come on. No chance. But this channel is dedicated to exploring alternatives to history through the lens of the world's most addictive video game. So let me know. And thanks for watching. And remember to stop playing Civ once in a while and watch some football. I'll see you next time.